Well, good morning, everybody. I'll open the meeting. My name is Jean Colt as presiding member, Leo Donoghue to my left, deputy presiding member, and Clayton Hines, specialist member. Part A of the agenda, I declare the meeting open at 9:32 a.m. and in doing so acknowledge we are hosting this meeting on the traditional land of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. We acknowledge the Aboriginal people as the traditional custodians of Western Australia, pay respects to elders past and present, and the ongoing connection between people, land, waters and community. This meeting will be run in accordance with DAP Standing Order 2024 under the Planning and Development Act regulations of 2011. The meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the DAP website in accordance with the Planning and Development Regulations 2011. And members are reminded to announce their name and title prior to speaking if required. Panel members may, during the course of the meeting, refer to technical devices to assist them in considering the information before them. Part B of our meeting this morning is to consider an application at the City of Swan. And in doing so, moving on to item 1, I'll confirm that all panel members have duly considered all of the documentation contained in Part B by signifying by raising your hands, please. Councillor Knight, thank you, all done. And disclosure of interest. Item 3.1, Peter Lee. Is this something that we should have on here?
Yeah, so Peter was initially on the agenda, but
he was on the. Oh, okay, sorry. Yes, okay. Well, Peter Lee, who was originally on the agenda, is declaring an indirect pecuniary interest. And under the standing declaration of interest, if agenda items have been considered at council meetings, the local government members acknowledge that they are bound by the ADAP Code of Conduct. Okay, moving on to item 3 on the agenda, the application for warehouse and incidental offices in Adelaide Street, Hazelmere. We do have a presentation on that. Mr. Jared Ross from Taylor Burrell Burnett will present on behalf of the applicant. We have a PowerPoint presentation, Mr. Ross. Thank you.
Right, good morning, presiding member. Thank you, panel members. As you said, my name is Jared Ross. I'm a principal with Taylor Burrell Burnett. With me today is Brett Shivers from Hesperia, and we are here to talk to you about what we hope is a relatively straightforward development application for a warehouse in Adelaide Street, Hazelmere. In terms of the subject site, it's owned light industrial under the city scheme and it's available for dry industrial purposes. The site is currently configured as 2 freehold titles, which are to be amalgamated under an existing WAPC approval. It's been cleared, graded and is ready for development as a result of the amalgamation approval. The site's owned by Hesperia, with sites to the south and northeast also owned by Hesperia and are completing and progressing development, which provides for a consistency in the streetscape presentation of development to both Adelaide Street and Stirling Crescent. In terms of some of the development that is going on the other sites, to give a flavour of the quality of the development that's being delivered, to the immediate south of the subject site is the approved and now constructed development for warehouses for Couriers Please and for another tenancy. So Couriers Please has occupied, the other tenancy, the other warehouse is in the final stages of completion. To the northeast of the site, shown in the red boundary there, is the recently approved warehouse for Lindsay Transport. So that came to the DAP last month, I believe it was, and is progressing to site works now. And then to the immediate north of that is a development application that the city are currently assessing and will come to the DAP next month, I believe, for a second warehouse across that site. In terms of the current development proposals, so it's 4 proposed warehouse tenancies across 2 buildings, each with incidental office space. Access will be shared, will be via a shared private road running down the spine of the 2 existing lots to be able to access all of the warehouses, in addition to crossovers on both Adelaide Street and Swan Crescent to provide for light vehicle access and some heavy vehicle access. The balance of the site, shown in green on this figure, will be progressed under a separate development application, so that will be stage 2 of the development here. There is a northern drainage area at the low point of the site, shown in behind the warehouse here. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor. Shown in behind the main warehouse there, that's the low point of the site. It's adjacent to an existing drainage area on the abutting property as well. Car parking across the site has been distributed for each tenancy for their convenience and designed to meet the needs of the confirmed tenants. The development has gone through extensive DRP input as well, so we've gone to 2 DRP sessions plus a chair review on this and have made a series of modifications to reflect their feedback. In terms of the landscape quality, so the landscape focuses on the front setback areas to Adelaide Street and Stirling Crescent, to the drainage basin in the northwestern portion of the site and in the car parking areas. It's approximately 8,600 square metres of landscaped area, which equates to 15.5% of the total site area. So the city requires 10% as a standard. So we have significantly exceeded that. The proposed tree planting, so we've got 34 large trees, 82 medium trees, 57 small trees. They will equate to approximately 10.4% of canopy coverage at maturity. There's also a shared outdoor area for the benefit of all tenancies for their employees to recreate, have lunch. It's a seating area with cover. We are satisfied with the city's recommendation and the vast majority of the conditions. There are 2 conditions that we have requested modifications to. We've discussed these with the city and we understand that the city are supportive of these modifications. They both relate to the pending amalgamation of the site. So condition 5 required that the arrangements must be made prior to the issue of building permit. We're not quite there yet. We've got our amalgamation approval. We've undertaken some site works. We just need a little bit more time to be able to complete that amalgamation. So we've asked that be deferred to occupation rather than prior to building permit. There is also a Section 70A notification required at condition 14. The condition was worded such that the Section 70A was to be applied to existing titles rather than the amalgamated title, which didn't make sense. So we've asked for that to be modified as well. In closing, the development proposal we consider represents a very high quality and well-resolved design, and it will be an outstanding addition to the Hazelmere precinct. We greatly appreciate the city's recommendation and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jared. Panel members, any of you have a question of Mr. Ross? Yes, Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of little things. The issue I have in the first instance says in the details of the ODP, the application, it says that under the regional scheme, the zone is reserved as urban, yet in our local planning scheme, it's light industrial. Is there a disconnect there, and is that being resolved, or am I missing something in the way these zonings are set?
Jared, yes.
No, I don't believe there is a disconnect there. So light industrial is a zoning which is permitted under the urban zone of the MRS.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. And the other issue I have is the very significant shortfall of parking given the size of the development and the proposed future development of the greens part of your land. Things change over time. When the green part is developed in the future, or if something else happens in the future that requires a lot more parking, would you be looking at how you might make provision for that in the future, be it underground parking or deck parking or the like, should there be an increase for demand on the site?
Yes, the balance of the site will be subject to a separate development approval, which will provide parking as part of that development, certainly. The parking that will be required will be dependent on the nature of the uses that are proposed and the nature of the tenants that are proposed there. So each of the each of the tenancies that we have identified have a tenant allocated to them. The tenant has confirmed the parking that they will require based on their employee numbers, and we have actually provided in excess of what the tenant requires. So we are very, very comfortable that the parking that we have provided actually will exceed the demand that is required on the site. I recognise it falls less than the city's scheme requirement, but it most certainly reflects the actual demand that will be required for the sites.
Thank you for the very straight up and down response. My point I was trying to make was that things change over time, Mr. Chairman, and it concerns me that should things change and the demand changes, that there would be in the future there may be other needs for that site. And whilst we're looking at a big concession here for these uses, which could change in the future, it worries me that we're not quite covering it when the next lot gets developed. So thank you for the response.
Perhaps I could just ask, I understand Councillor Henderson's query. What happens if the tenancy changes? You've got necessarily there won't be a DA for a tenancy change. So if you change a tenant who's got a far greater requirement for parking, how does that, perhaps the council may wish to answer that as well. But in some instances, I've seen that councils require a deed to cover the fact that a tenancy may change.
Yeah, if I'm able to answer.
Yes.
This development has been designed specific to the tenants that we have engaged with. The parking will be part of their lease agreements. Should those tenants fall through, the new lease agreement would still be subject to the same parking availability on site. So that the tenants would be signing up on the basis that that's the amount of parking that they have, and it would be assessed by Hesperia, as that's the long-term owner of the facility, to confirm that the number of employees actually won't exceed the parking that's required on site. So,
okay. All right. Perhaps we can raise that with the council office.
Chair, but
yes.
I mean, the other point is, if there is a tenancy change in the future, and it does happen, then a tenant comes along and says, "I want 30 days."
Maybe you should go over
sorry,
there, please,
just
Mr.
a
Shields,
slide.
because it's a bit difficult for others.
So tenancies do change in or can change in the future. So in an instance where a tenant in the industrial framework, the tenants come along, they say we need 30 bays. If there's 25 there, then the site doesn't suit. If the tenant's prepared to lose some hard stand or prepared to pay for changes that might be required to get what they need, plus an additional allowance, then that comes into that tenancy agreement. So absolute worst case, if there's 60 bays provided, for example, and somebody says I need 200, then clearly something would have to change on that tenancy agreement before you could actually take a tenant on. That happens regularly.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I understand that. Thank you very much. Any further questions of the presenters? Councillor Knight.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just one quick one regarding the design review panel recommendations. Will they all be adopted by the applicant, please?
So we had progressively adopted the design review panel recommendations with changes to the plans. So the final plans that have been presented to the panel today are the plans that have been amended to reflect the design review panel's changes, inclusive of one final change that the city recommended with respect to zebra crossings across the private road to connect the footpaths.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? If not, panel members, do you have any queries of the council staff in regard to this? Yes, Councillor Henderson.
Thank you. I did discuss this parking issue with Mr. Russell in some detail, and accepting the response from the presenter in regard to the significant shortfall in parking for the size of the lot. Do we need to put an advice note on or something to the effect that there is a parking shortfall and that any changes that would impact parking on the site have to be addressed at the city?
Mr. Russell or Bella?
Chairman, as probably the panel well knows, I'm not a fan of advice notes. They don't mean anything greatly.
Yeah.
I think I accept the proposition that Mr. Shivers has articulated. If the actual demand for parking is calculated with specific reference to the direct needs of I call it a closed operator, and that being an operator that is only providing parking for staff and is not providing parking for external customers, then a proprietor can calculate to a T the amount of car parking they need based on their staffing arrangements. And picking up on what Mr. Shivers has said, that if a tenancy change has got to sign up to a lease for the building and a certain amount of car parking, and they have twice as much or 3 times as much parking demand as the parking provided, then given the disposition of this site, I think it would be very difficult to find extra parking unless you're making a deck arrangement. Even with the layout, I would say that would be problematic. I think the end outcome would be that tenant not be able to sign up for that property if they needed those bays. So you are constructing to a set of tenants, and you're only ever going to get tenants that will have like numbers of employees or thereabouts, given the limited array of set car parking. So it's tightly moulded, and the who you tenant or not tenant is going to depend on having tenants with similar staffing arrangements to what the current tenants are. If not, you're probably not going to be able to tenant them.
Okay.
Thank you for the response, Mr. Chairman. I pretty much expected something like that, having discussed it with Mr. Russell yesterday. I just simply wanted to put it out there that that area concerns me. Should there be a change in the future, I haven't proposed any change to the recommendation. Just putting it on the table.
I suppose the only time that's manifest itself is if there's a lot of on-street parking starting to occur if a tenant exceeds the requirement, but that's probably a policing thing for council eventually anyway. Councillor Knight, you had a question too, did you?
No more. That's it. I'm fine. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any other panel members got questions of the council staff? If not, we can move on to the item itself. Thank you, Mr. Ross. And in order to us discuss the item, I need a mover and seconder. So, panel members, can I have a mover for the item, please? Yes, moved. Mr. Hyam, seconder. Donahue. Mr. Hyam, would you like to?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Presiding Member. I'm more than happy to support this proposal. I understand the concerns about parking, but I sort of know the area fairly well, and I think if the result was street parking, I doubt whether that's going to occur in that location. And as the presiding member suggested, the city would be able to manage that so it doesn't occur. So any change of tenancy is really going to be only a change for someone who either accepts that amount of parking or can find some other way of providing parking on site. The landscaping, I think, is high quality for the location there, and I think given that it is within the planning framework, apart from the parking, I'm more than happy to support it.
Thank you, Mr. Hyam. Lee, would you like to speak to the item?
Look, I agree with those comments. I note that the actual architectural design of the building has gone through a number of design review panels and has undergone change, and I think that it's a quality development. Likewise, the landscaping, and I agree the parking is of concern, but it does seem to me that there are solutions around the parking, and it becomes a compliance issue if you end up with street parking excessive. So I'm more than happy to support this application.
Thank you. Other panel members wish to speak to the item? Councillors? Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree with the mover and the seconder. It is a high quality development. It's certainly a development that will improve the lot of everyone in the city of Perth with the ability to handle goods in and out efficiently. I like the look of the development. It's been well presented. The layout of the landscaping is of a high quality, as already suggested. I can't fault it. The only reason I didn't move this is because of my concerns about parking. Things change in time. We've seen that happen all over the city of Swan, where we've seen massive tracts of land put out for parking that have been empty, and vice versa. We've seen overflows. So clearly getting a balance is very important, and noted the presenters' angle on how to deal with that. Clearly, there can't be overflow onto the streets adjoining the property, because they are busy with significant size vehicles using the roads, and the damage that could happen would be quite messy. So I don't see any opportunities for overflow into the street side. But otherwise, happy to support, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Knight, do you wish to speak to the item?
I don't really have much to add. I mean, I agree. It's it's a good development. I'm happy to support it. I would like to see the design review panel recommendations adopted entirely. And it's good. It's good to see the landscaping 15% in excess of the city's requirements. That's positive. So I'll be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the summary of expressions to date are that it fits the planning framework, zoning and land use proposed. All the issues such as wastewater, site drainage, traffic, build form, plot ratio, facades, landscaping have all been addressed appropriately. And I think from the parking requirement, it seems like that the panel are happy with the controls under the lease, and perhaps later on some council compliance. So I'm supporting the application as well.
Mr. Chair, while you're holding the floor,
Yes,
is there a
I'd like to move that we change
desire
to condition.
Oh, there was a condition, of course. Okay. All right. Well, as we are discussing the recommendation, if the mover and seconder have are happy to accept the requirements, I think we can take it, or do we?
Just need to be clear about what changes you're making.
Yes, okay. So the mover and seconder are in agreement to make the changes as requested to conditions 5 and 14 regarding the amalgamation conditions. So if there's no dissent to that, I think we can incorporate that into the minutes. Okay. All right, thank you. All right, Mr. Hine, do you want to close debate on the item?
There's nothing further to add.
Nothing further. Okay, well, if there's no further discussion on the item, I'll put the item. All those in favour? As amended. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so the next item on this part of the agenda is Form 2 DAP application 0 none for section 31 SATREC considerations. There are none. So that's the end of part B from the City of Swan. Thank you, councillors. Mr. Russell and Bella, thank you very much for your attendance, and we'll see you next time. And
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Okay, we'll move on to part C of the agenda, which is City of Cockburn. And we have Councillors Dewan and Councillor Weidenbauer with us. And we have presenters as well. We also have officers here, Dunstan and Lachlan Compton, and one other. Who's the third one at the City of Swan? City of Cockburn, sorry.
Yeah, good morning. This is Councillor Dewan.
Yes.
This is Riley Brown, Coordinator of Development Services. And I'm also joined just off screen by Alicia Kemp, our Coordinator of Public Health.
Thank you very much. Okay, item 1 on the agenda, of course, is our declaration of due consideration. Can all panel members acknowledge they've duly considered the documentation contained within Part C of the agenda and Part C related information? By raising your hand. Councillor Weidenbauer, thank you, that's good. Item 2, disclosure of interests. I have had none, so councillors have considered at the council meeting this item, then acknowledge that in accordance with section 2.4.9 of the DAP code, then they will exercise independent judgment in relation to the item. So item 3 on the agenda, the application for mixed-use developments at 21 Muriel Court, Cockburn Central. We do have 2 presentations, or one presentation and another. No, we do have 2 presentations, sorry. Peter Merger from Urbanista and Mr. Butcher from SKG, whatever. SGKS Architecture, I presume it is. Mr. Merger.
Good morning and thank you. I'll start and then hand over to Sam, who will discuss the concept and I guess the touch on the DRP process. But I'll keep my presentation relatively short. It's we've had a very good experience dealing with the City of Cockburn over this application. It's been a very good process. There's been I guess a fairly lengthy pre-lodgement process, which we were able to present the application to the design review panel twice. The first time more than was over a year ago. I think September last year that we actually commenced the DRP process. The first meeting we received some comments which we went away and addressed. We then managed to come back in December, I think it was, before we then amended the plans and basically submitted the application, and it's been a fairly smooth process ever since. The application itself is for special disability accommodation. It's a mixed-use development. The land use has been commended by the design review panel in the city as being something that is, I guess, required. 24 units are proposed in total, including 2 commercial units on the ground floor. The development is proposed to be staged, with pretty much half the development constructed in the first stage and the second half of the development in the second stage. In terms of the planning framework, as detailed in the officer report, the application complies with, or mostly complies, and where it doesn't, it's been addressed in an assessment against the element objectives of the Cockburn Central North Structure Plan guidelines and the R codes. So we've got no issues with respect to the conditions of approval that have been listed. We're happy with those. And we think that it's a nice building and it's going to contribute to this area, both in terms of its land use and I think its appearance. So there's not much more for me to say. I'm happy to take any questions, and perhaps I'll hand over to Sam for his presentation.
I think we'll wait till Sam has said his piece. Mr. Butcher.
Good morning, all. Good to see you. Sorry I couldn't be there in person, but I'll just quickly share what I have, just so it's something to talk to. All right, so as Peter mentioned, we've gone through quite a positive collaborative process with the DRP and the City of Cockburn in designing this. So we went forward initially with something maybe slightly less resolved than we usually would, so we could get that initial feedback and then really integrate it into our design and thinking on it. So I'll just quickly run through the program and then the overall intent of the project. So we have quite a positive view of what the use and intent for this place is going to be. We've done quite a bit of work in the SDA or Specialist Disability Accommodation space over in Victoria and some other places. And it's essentially, if you're not familiar, dedicated housing, which is designed for the specific needs of people living with disability and is part of the NDIS funding model. So the program, just quickly, we've got ground floor tenancies, one hopefully for cafe, food and beverage on the corner, which could be quite a prominent corner in this new precinct, and then another smaller commercial tenancy in stage 2 for potentially office or other retail use. As it is staged, we have this dashed red line indicating the 2 separate areas. So the majority of the ground floor will be developed in stage 1, and then it'll just be the small additional foyer and commercial as part of stage 2. And then the upper levels are the housing. So we've got these quite large apartments, which are adaptively designed so they have a maximum amount of utility for the maximum amount of people, and quite efficient and, yeah, hopefully useful to the people that will end up using them. We've integrated a variety of inputs as well over the time and trying to include access on each end of the common spaces for light and airflow, and shading and that sort of thing has also been something we've done a bit of work to make sure we're doing as best we can for lighting and passive solar gain and shading. We've also made sure to include large common areas on the upper levels. Being a urban intended area, being a zone as a local centre, we have definitely wanted to try and keep the open spaces on the upper levels and have as much as possible so we can create a level of community and camaraderie, I suppose, within the people living in these developments, and because that's sometimes quite hard to travel outside of the immediate vicinity. So we've got, this is the one for stage 2, and then on the upper level we have a much larger one again for stage 1. So just a quick overview of the various design principles we considered. So context and character. Again, the local centre zoning, we've informed a fairly urban design, but we've also wanted to make sure there's lots of street activation and the residential use is still clear on the levels above. Landscape quality, while still being this urban sort of town centre area, we did want to make sure that landscape was still prioritised and have made sure we've got enough deep soil planting for canopy trees in select locations, and then compensating for the rest in extensive on-structure planting on the upper levels. In terms of the built form and scale, we've tried to make sure that new streetscape, which is essentially non-existent at this stage, has a really strong defining building which can help build that streetscape along in the future. And so that includes 0 setbacks for the ground floor along the future Ningort Drive, as well as a small cutout on the corner to allow a bit of relief on the intersection. We've also tried to make sure the floor plans are adaptable and functional. So there's a long-term longevity inbuilt into the project, and prioritising quality materials which aren't excessive or flowery, but are just sturdy and will look good for a long time. Sustainability, as mentioned before, we've looked at a lot of passive design principles and we have had it rated for a 4-star minimum green star rating. And amenities are a pretty important part of this building. As mentioned, common spaces and the design of the apartments themselves. It's quite a legible building, I think. We've got clear entrances, commercial tenancies, and the residential are all very visible. And the future artwork allocation that we have has got a very prominent central position, which we are looking forward to developing future with a local artist. Safety, passive surveillance, and the allocation of vehicle movements and pedestrian movements are pretty important. And community is the other important element of this one, with SDA being quite an important, we find, housing sector, which is needing additional investment throughout the state. So, and being very much in the centre of this new precinct, I think, is a really important gesture. And aesthetics, generally, we sort of covered off a few of those things, but again, the practical design of it with a somewhat localised character using limestone and a bit of colour is something we hope to, well, encourage similar development in this area going forward. So, and I think that about covers it. So let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Butcher. Panel members, do any of you have questions of either of the presenters?
Yeah, I do have some questions, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Dewan, yes, go ahead.
Okay, so first of all, I think very well presented document. A few questions around the disability dwellings. So as you would appreciate that, you know, people living with disability usually have visitors, loved ones visiting them. So I do hope that there is sufficient sort of parking available, both on the street and in the building. And of course, if the people are staying on the upper levels, which I believe is a 5-story building, my second question is that I do hope that the building provides for, you know, chutes which will go down in a separate area for all the waste and everything. So just these are the few questions that just come to my mind right now.
Yes. Sorry, Sam, do you want to answer that? I think it's in regard to visitor parking and waste management.
Yes, yeah, we've done a lot of back and forth with our traffic engineer on parking and waste as well. So, and we've worked with the City of Cockburn as well to try and make sure that waste is most effectively managed. So in terms of visitor parking, this particular form of housing, generally the residents with the most care, which this is designed for, the sort of quite upper level of care, generally will very rarely have their own car. And so the amount which heavily reduces the required parking for residents themselves. However, as you say, visitors are quite common. And there also could be a space for other residents in the building that might not be a participant themselves. So there is allocations internally in the Undercroft parking as well. That's why we've also ensured there's this row of parking on the laneway, so it's a bit more accessible and easier for visitors to find. So it's definitely been a consideration, and our advice from traffic engineers and other precedent projects is this is, if anything, more than what would be required for that. And there is also anticipated additional street parking that will be put into the street reserve as it develops. And then further in terms of waste, we've allowed for vertical ducting for various services. We have had issues with specifically waste chutes in the past, so it's a bit of a depends on the SDA provider themselves who we will engage next, and they'll discuss if that's something they want or not, because it becomes a building management issue.
Okay, so what you're saying is the condition will deal with that, is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
And through the chair, the other small question that I have is around the noise, because it's a multi-dimensional sort of a building where you have retail outlets, where you have residents, etc. I hope there are considerable conditions and building design that will prevent disturbance to the disability people with disability living in that building.
Mr. Butcher?
Yes, the advice we have so far from our acoustic analysis and assessment is that both incoming and outgoing acoustic pollution or effects are managed as it is, and the conditions that are imposed as well address that, so as far as we're aware. And I think there are elements within the design in terms of setbacks and the way we've set back the commercial and the residential that had that considered, and similar projects that we've had in even more urban settings have probably had less consideration. So I think we're pretty well placed with this one for that, for both residents and neighbouring developments.
Thank you. Councillor John, any further questions?
No.
No? Any other questions of the panel?
No.
No? Okay, thank you. Any panel members seek clarification of anything from the city staff?
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Home.
Just a number of questions, a couple of small ones, I suppose, but in relation to conditions 3 and 4, I'm a bit puzzled as to the planning basis for those conditions, and particularly in relation to condition 4, I'm not sure what a neat and tidy condition might look like, and at what point it's not neat and tidy.
Yes, council staff, your response to that?
So condition 3 and 4 are just generally standard conditions we put on, I guess, any DA, but we wouldn't be against if they were needed to be removed as standard conditions.
What's the planning basis for them? Where does it derive? Where is it derived from?
Condition 3 generally, we have found does have sort of a place finding or a wayfinding element to it, in that the location of the street numbers isn't often something that's considered at a DA stage, but when the detailed drawings do come up, it is important for us to take that into consideration. Condition 4 generally, where we have used that in the past from a compliance perspective, is when construction sites become unmanaged or construction sites become dangerous. We are able to fall back on that condition to require the developer to tidy up a construction site to our satisfaction.
This is going beyond construction, isn't it, that condition? That's into the future as well.
The condition is not intended to apply in perpetuity. It's more as a tidy condition during construction. However, I do note that we do have a separate construction management plan condition. So if the panel is of the view to remove that particular condition, we can certainly feel comfortable that the construction management plan can deal with those matters.
Another question is in relation to Nort Drive. Is that currently Crown land, and what's the timing for the construction of that road?
The city is responsible for the ultimate delivery of Nort Drive, and we're seeking contributions via a development contribution plan for the area. At this stage, we don't have the sufficient land holdings to be able to deliver the entirety of the road. So it is currently an unknown as to when the delivery can occur.
Is the city?
So not all sections are currently in Crown land holdings.
Okay. Is the section outside this development Crown land, or in the under the management of the city?
section outside of the entire length. is not-
Adjacent to this development.
That small part is city-owned land, which kind of leads to some of those conditions around the management agreement for the slashing of vegetation within what is city-owned land.
So why wouldn't the city be responsible for the maintenance of that land?
We do maintain it, however, we'll only maintain it in a minimal state because it's not a constructed road and it's essentially just vacant land. So we can't guarantee that there'd be an active maintenance regimen that would ensure bushfire is mitigated appropriately.
And the bell rating currently is FZ, and our current management regime isn't enough to be considered as management for a lower bell rating. So in order to, it's in the report, but in order to reduce the lower, to get a lower bell rating, that's why we have that condition. So the landowner or the developer can manage it until North Drive is constructed in the future.
Thank you. And just finally, and I'll move this anyway, but advice note C probably should be in the body of the either as condition 1 or in the preamble to the application.
No objection.
Okay.
Thank you. Any further questions of the council staff? If not, thank you very much for that, for your responses and presenters. We'll now move into the body of the responsible authority report to discuss the item as a panel. In order to do so, I need a mover and seconder for the recommendation or for the draft recommendations at this stage. Do I have a mover? Councillor Dewar moves. Seconder. Mr. Hyam, thank you very much. Councillor Dewar, you wish to speak to the item, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this development is much needed in the current housing scenarios where we have so much of demand in the market and very little supply. So, and this development is not only focused on the residents but also on the disability sector people. Plus, it's very close to the Cockburn station, which is probably 1.5 kilometers away from this development. There is sufficient public transport, next to the development also, and plus it's been well designed with the help of the city and the proponent together sitting down for a long time to develop it, to refine the design. The concerns that I had are adequately, I guess, answered. In terms of the noise for the people living with disability, in terms of waste management, and of course, street parking and sufficient parking for the visitors who will be visiting their loved ones in those dwellings. So I'm happy to move this motion for the approval of the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor John. Mr. Hyam, you wish to speak to the item.
Yes, thank you. I'm fully supportive of it. Very impressive development. It has all the hallmarks of something I think will be a bit of a role model or a model for future similar developments. I agree with the comments made by Councillor Dewar. The proposal, while it has a few variations, they can be fully supported. I would, however, like to just make a couple of amendments, if possible.
Given that you've got a few, I'll take the amending motion.
One at a time?
One at a time.
All right. I won't deal with condition 3. I think I'll leave that as it is. But condition 4, I would propose that be deleted because from what I've heard from the officers, this was only meant to be for the construction period. There is a condition relating to construction. So I'm proposing condition 4 be deleted.
Okay, we'll take that as a moving deletion of condition 4. Do we have a seconder?
Yes.
Yes, Dad, Donahue, any discussion?
No.
If not, I'll move the item. All those in favour? That's unanimous.
Thank you. And then in relation to advice note C, I'm proposing that becomes condition 1 and all the conditions be renumbered and the advice notes be lettered.
Yes.
Okay, so moving that advice note C becomes
condition 1.
Condition 1, and that's 1 and 2, all the others
They'll all
are
be
renumbered.
renumbered.
Okay. All right, do we have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Yes, yes, thanks, Lee, you seconded that. Any discussion? If not, I'll put that amendment. All in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Anyone else wish to speak to the item? If not, I might just make mention that in summary that the proposal conforms with the overall planning objectives of the framework, the scheme, and also the local structure plan. Where variations in my mind have been proposed, they've been addressed accordingly, and the design review panel was supportive of the proposal. And in regard to variations on parking, building height, and the bushfire assessments, they've all been adequately addressed. As a stage development, my only query will be how the staging will occur and the interface between the stage 1 and stage 2 is treated. And I suppose there needs to be, if there's going to be a gap between the timing, then I think the development will have to have some sort of decent appearance. And I'm interested to see how stage 1 develops without solar panels. But that's something that I'm sure the applicants will address in due course. So that being the case, I'll pass it back to Councillor Dewan to close debate on the item. Councillor Dewan seems to have disappeared. Okay, all right. Well, I'll take that as saying he doesn't wish to speak further on the item. Okay, so I'll put the, we still have a quorum. So I'll put the item as amended. All those in favour? Carried 4.
Unanimous.
4 being unanimous at the moment. Let's hope it's just a technical glitch rather than anything else. Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, Form 2DAP applications. There's none. Section 31, SAP reconsideration. There are none. In that case, I'll move on to part C of the agenda. Appeared on mine. There's nothing in that. Oh, sorry, we're on part C. Part D. All the SAT applications, Supreme Court appeals are listed. Moving on to general business, if there is none, I will simply thank the presenters and council staff for your attendance and answering queries. And I'll close the meeting at 10:26 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and we'll see you all later.
Thank you. See ya.